Hello and welcome to La Vida Futbol. Today's video is a 9v9 youth football tactics video. The video is aimed at under 11 and under 12 age groups. Now before we begin, I would like to clarify that tactics for under 11 and under 12 should not be the priority, and I wouldn't recommend you first focusing on tactics, especially if you're a new coach. I would recommend focusing on technique, ability, and essentially for the players to master the basics such as controlling, passing, receiving, dribbling, shooting, controlling aerial balls, heading the ball, different types of passes. So for example, passing a ball short, long, in the air, and these are all things that need to be worked on, and that should be the priority. If you have players that have the ability to do all these things and have moved on to spatial awareness, then you can start getting into some tactics. Okay, so this video should help you as a coach to essentially answer questions that come from a game or from your players. And this video should offer some solutions and some ideas as to what your players can do during the attack or defensively, or how you can set up the shape of your team. So this is what this video can help you with. Okay, so let's begin. So now by looking at this formation, you can see here that you only have two center backs. So these two defensive players are going to be defensive minded, and I'm not saying they cannot attack, because they could, and essentially one would be acting as a sweeper should one push up, and then the formation will become a 1-4-3. This is of course if you are in possession of the ball and you want to attack. So let's take a look at some general advantages and disadvantages of this formation. So advantage is that you have three attackers. So this is a very offensive minded formation because you have three players always on the attack. That can make it very difficult for opponents to deal with, especially on the wing, because on the wing you have partnerships with the midfielders. So you have your attackers and your midfielders there both pushing and putting pressure on the sideline. Then that can essentially be a bit of a headache for opponents and for the other team. Another thing that can be done with this formation tactically is for players, and essentially you as a coach can work on overlaps. So here, for example, because of the partnerships, you can have players work on their overlap and on their crossing. Okay, so those are some things that can be done offensively. You can also work on your underlap. So the left midfielder, for example, here, passing the ball to the left forward and then running in front of them through the line, and then allowing the left forward to dribble and either pass to the left midfielder or dribble into the center or pass to the middle or to the other forwards, whatever it is. But that is another tactical move that can be done with this formation because of the partnerships on the wing. Okay, so like I said, it's very offensive minded, and offensively it can be a bit of a headache for opponents, but defensively there is a lot of space in the center of the field. Here, for example, there's a lot of space open in the center, in the middle of the pitch. Okay, and that could be a bit of a challenge, especially for this player here, because they have to occupy a lot of space, especially during counterattacks. During a counterattack, teams can essentially have open lanes right next to that midfielder, especially if your left and right midfielder are up the pitch. Then there is a lot more space available for teams to attack. Another disadvantage is if you don't have a player, a center midfielder, that can meet the demands, and those demands for this age group are technical demands. So the ability for them to be able to receive the ball, pass the ball first time or maximum 2 or 3 touches, that they have a habit of looking over their shoulder, looking around, and being able to get out of pressure when necessary. Because they are alone, it's most likely that they will be often in a situation where there are two players defending the one center midfielder. Okay, so this player needs to be able to handle that pressure, to be able to get out of that pressure, to be able to turn with pressure and essentially pass the ball when under pressure. Those are things that are necessary for this formation to work for you and your team. You do need to have that player. You need to have players on the sideline that have the ability to go up and down the pitch, especially if you want to work on having your left and right midfielder do the overlaps, crossing, and being part of the attack. Then you're going to need left and right midfielders that can essentially meet the running demands, the physical demands, and essentially the legs to be able to run up and down the pitch and still be able to make a cross. Okay, so then that's going to be important. Your left and right forwards should be able to be good with the ball, be able to control control the ball and be really good at one-on-ones. This is a formation that is offensive minded, and it's going to be important that these players can handle the duels that they have against the defenders. Another thing that is both an advantage and a disadvantage is, of course, that space that you have next to the center midfielder, and it is a disadvantage defensively because this gap can be exploited during counterattacks, and when opponents are playing with two players in the midfield, then of course you will have that numerical disadvantage. But that space is also an advantage when in possession, because one of the center backs can push up and essentially help with the attack, but then that would mean that these two players need to be able to communicate so that they can alternate with moving up the pitch. If, for example, the left center back pushes up, then the right center back needs to shift over, and then this player here, your right midfielder, needs to cover, okay? And that is when you want to play with two backs at all time. If you are confident with your center backs and they have the ability to play on their own, then they will be taking on a sweeper role where they are the last man and they can essentially challenge. And you want to do that when the opponents are playing with one forward, one center striker, so against a one-on-one. If you have a 2 versus 1, then you're gonna always want to have two in the back to essentially at the very least have even number situation. Okay, so those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. Next, let's take a look at how we can defend. So this formation is essentially primed for a high press because you have so many players already up the pitch. So when you have 3 forwards, you can essentially add a lot of pressure to the opponents. This would require them to have their left and right midfielder drop back and help with the build-up. Now, in a 9 versus 9, this is a big disadvantage because you no longer have offensive power on the sidelines. When you need 4 players for your build-up and then at least 2 players in the center of the pitch, then you're left with your 2 strikers to essentially wait for the ball and try to get space. But here, as you can see, they're playing against a 3 versus 2. They have a numerical disadvantage. Now, the danger comes when these 2 players here, the 2 midfielders, can essentially find the gaps, because should they get the ball, then like I mentioned earlier, then we will be in a 2 versus 1 disadvantage because we only have one midfielder. This would require our left and right midfielders to tuck in right away and to essentially try to outnumber the midfielders and try to recover the ball before the 2 midfielders recover and help and essentially build from the wings. So again, a high press is possible. What's important is to cover the passes to the center of the pitch. So we would need our forwards to be a little bit more tucked in, closing the gaps and not allowing the midfielders to get the ball. By doing that, they would force a pass to the outside, and then this is where we can put a lot more pressure. So when that happens, we will have our center forward cover the pass back, we will have our left forward put pressure, and we will have our left midfielder cover the pass to the outside. Our center midfielder will cover the player in the middle, the right midfielder will cover the other midfielder, and then the right forward is essentially trying to cut off both passes either to the other center back or to the outside, in this case to the left midfielder. Okay, but with all that pressure, we should be able to force a long ball, force a bad pass, or essentially take the ball away, right? If this center back does not have the composure to deal with that situation, then it's possible for us to recover the ball really high up the pitch. But so your team needs to have the ability to work together, to put that pressure and communicate well, to be well balanced defensively so that offensively they can try to score more goals. But that is it for this video. I hope it helps. If you guys have any questions, make sure to comment that in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.